coming up to around 2 months ago that we checked in with our partner for London sales and lettings, that is Benham Reeves. They joined us as a commercial partner about a couple of months ago, but honestly, there's been so much going on in the London property market that we felt it necessary to dial up the oracle that is Marc von Grundherr of Benham Reeves. Marc, lovely to see you again. We just thought we've got to check in with you because there's so much going on. Now, we've heard, well, where do I start? Last time we spoke, it was absolutely crazy in the London market. I'm going to guess that it's got even crazier. Am I right?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's nice to be here. Yeah, I mean, the London market has been, you know, it's red hot. And that's the word I keep using everywhere, but it genuinely is totally bonkers. I mean, the lettings market, I have never, I mean, I said it last time and I'll say it again. We have just almost zero stock. I was just with my Ealing branch first thing this morning. They have one property to let this right now. A Highgate office where I was just before I came here have got 2 properties to let. And that's just not enough. And I'm not saying stuff is coming on, but we've just got nothing to let, which is just unbelievable. The sales market is okay. There's more stuff to sell because there's still restriction in travel, but the rental market across the whole of London is just, it's just manic.
Wow. Well, we're hearing in the media this week of tenants paying over asking price, phone ringings at phones in lettings agents ringing at 9 when a listing went live the night before. Is that all happening across Benham Reeves network?
Yeah, 100%. We've got gazumping in the letting market. We've got over the asking price offers being agreed. We had I was just telling someone yesterday, we had a property in our Beaufort Park office, which is Colindale, Northwest London, Zone 4. We put a property on Monday morning. By lunchtime, we had 6 viewings scheduled in from the afternoon. We had them every 10 minutes, so it was just over an hour. We had 4 offers and we ended up at, not only was the asking price 20% more than it was the year before, the highest bidder signed 2 years straight and paid 10% above that. I've never seen, you know, I mean, that's a mad situation that you have people so desperate for stock. The other thing that you've got that we, touch wood, I haven't had it yet, but I keep hearing rumblings from other agents that tenants are saying, you're going to have to evict me. I've got nowhere to go. I'm not going. I can't find anything. So I'm going to sit here. And that's a really big problem.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's happy days for landlords with the situation you described with, you know, really, really high tenant demand, but then not such happy experience when we are hearing that tenants are staying put because they can't find anywhere to move. So the whole sort of system is getting almost clogged up, isn't it? I mean, it's just absolutely extraordinary. I've got a couple of really positive things which have come out about the London property market in the last week, which I wanted to run by you.
Yeah.
You know, London's always been known as a tech hub. It's one of the top cities in the world for tech. And we've heard this week that there's been a 94% increase in incorporation of tech companies in 2021, according to Companies House. I think 18,000 jobs have been created through those incorporations. Now, this is good news for landlords, Marc, because people in the tech industry, young professionals, well paid.
Yep, 100%. We love tech. London's, what is it, top tech city in the world now, isn't it? We have more tech companies here than they have in Silicon Valley. I mean, let's be honest, that's brilliant for us as a large, developed, creaking nation. It's great that we've got all this tech here. As you quite rightly says, tech is all young people. Young people aren't necessarily able to afford to get on the ladder yet, or they want flexibility. A lot of them are renting. I mean, we obviously, we're a large company, so we work with the top tech names, you know, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Meta, as opposed to Facebook. And, you know, they're bringing people in all the time. You know, and that's in addition to, as you say, the tech startups. I mean, it's brilliant. They don't all become successes, but these people are working here. They're paying their taxes. But again, it's good for the London letting market because a lot of them rent and they have decent jobs, decent salaries. You know, it's good news, but it's not good news because there's very little stock. So we need all your landlords out there to come and buy. What they should all do is just remortgage and buy one more property in London each. And then that might help a tiny bit.
Well, would you recommend a 1-bed or a 2-bed, Marc? Where do you see the best demand, stroke best yield?
That is the most difficult question. For years, I used to say 1-beds. So I have a few properties and they're all 1-bedrooms, other than my house, obviously. Today, given the fact a 1-bedroom will cost you a higher price per square foot than a 2-bedroom. So a 1-bedroom, I was at somewhere this morning in Hounslow, 1-bedroom is £650 per square foot, 2 bedrooms is £575 per square foot, or just under £585 or something. Now, you can get a 2-bedroom, which you can rent to 2 sharers or a couple with a child, or a single person that wants to work from home. The options on a 2-bed are pretty strong out there. The cost price is lower. And so actually, I always used to drive clients to 1-bedrooms because I thought it's less capital value. You can split your risk. I think now, given the fact the pound per square foot is lower and the rent is pretty much on a par with what you'll get for a 1-bed, proportionately, actually, I think your yield is a little bit better on a 2-bed at the moment. And so given the capital value, so my view would be is actually plump for a 2-bed. But if you're buying a 2-bed, do not buy a 1-bathroom or obviously a 2-bed, 1-bath. You do not want that, because that means you can only rent it to a single person or a couple. You know, you can't rent it to 2 sharers because the old days of rising damp and people sharing bathrooms is long gone in this market, and everybody wants to have their own bathroom. So make sure it's a 2-bed, 2-bath. Everybody, you know, the number of schemes you see where it's 2-bed, 1-bath, and people say, oh, but it costs 30, 50, whatever, £50,000 less. It's going to really hamper your rent and it's going to hamper your resale. So go for a 2-bed, 2-bath. But that would be that's my pick at the moment. That's what I'd say.
That's Marc's pick. I like that. I'm going to add just one other thing to that. You'll probably agree on this one, Marc, as well. Try to go for somewhere where the bedrooms are roughly the same size.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you get people saying, well, actually, no, I want the big bedroom, and the other person says, no, I want the big bedroom. So, and also I would say balcony or somewhere that has communal outside space is probably very high up as well, isn't it?
We do quite a lot of surveys. Well, not quite a lot. We do surveys throughout the year to tenants, and we did it all through COVID. And what we found was a shift towards outside space or some form of outside space, not necessarily a garden, but, you know, a balcony or communal gardens. But having your own little outside space was important because people working from home. Internet was very high. Actually, what we've seen, and there was a movement away from prioritizing being close to transport during COVID. Transport's shot back up. People want to be close to the tube again. But we've seen outside space still a number 3 pick under the internet. It was, you know, it was fast broadband number 1, and that's dropped. So actually, locations near the tube has gone back up, but outside space is still up there with, you know, and I think it's, you know, people like the idea of having somewhere to sit outside. And I think COVID, whether you know, think it's been awful or, you know, but it has been awful, but what it's brought out is things that people think about now is, you know, I want to have somewhere to sit outside, you know, I don't want to be cooped up, and it's good. And so, yeah, outside space, 100%. The other thing you said about the equal size bedrooms, some developers have these quite nice, I've seen these quite cool apartments where you come in the front door and the living room is ahead of you with a kitchen in it. And to the left is 1 bedroom with a bathroom, and to the right is 1 bedroom with a bathroom. That is the perfect design. That, for me, so many more developers to do that. The only reason they don't do it is because your stack is your waste, your stack, which they call it, which is the pipe, is not in the same place. So you need stacks on both sides of the property. However, from a usability stance and from a, quite rightly, as you say, people don't argue about, oh, I've got the one with the ensuite and I've got the smaller bedroom, so I want to pay less. You don't end up with that argument. I just think that's a really cool design. I like that.
Well, we've got one of those exact designs in Walthamstow in East 17, and it's not really ever empty. Now, Marc, you mentioned developers there. That's actually led me very nicely on to my next point. We are hearing.
We could have rehearsed this, but we didn't. I might add, we did not.
We did not. No, we're just going with the flow. Yeah. We heard this week that planning applications for tall buildings has dropped by a third in 2021. Now, this is also relevant to the supply-demand imbalance. You deal with a lot of overseas investors. They love these shiny new tower block apartments, whether they're buying them as a pied-à-terre or an investment for themselves. This is going to constrict things further when the pipeline of new apartments starts to dry up.
Isn't that survey on the numbers of higher high rise? Yeah, that's not on the numbers of units. It's just on the height of buildings.
Correct.
Now, there are two reasons. I think there's one of the main reasons that developers don't like doing these high rise buildings. I'll come to your question in a second, but you have to bear in mind these high rise buildings are, number one, incredibly expensive to build. It's not because the height as you go up to 30, 40, 50 stories, it becomes incredibly expensive. And we all know that raw materials have gone through the roof for glass, cement, concrete. It's gone up. The amount of money that building sites use on petrol and diesel is huge. And the government are changing the fuel duty on red diesel, which is what they use on building sites. So these buildings are expensive to construct, number one. Number two, when most developers, we don't think about this, but when developers usually sell, they sell off plan, they complete in phases. So they might complete the first floor and then the second floor and the third floor. On big buildings, you have to complete the whole structure before you start completing. So it means if you've got a 40-story tower and there's 5 units on each floor, that's 200 units, and you can't complete on any until the whole thing's finished. Whereas if you do one smaller building, you can complete that and then move on to the second one, or keep them going in tandem, but at different times. They're expensive to build, very expensive to build. Number two, you can't complete on, you don't get any stage payments save for the payment plan. And number three, you need more customer service people to deal with the handovers because you've got so many flooding at the same time. And so those are some of the factors. I'm not saying it's the only factor because ultimately developers will price it in, but it's not about that, it will be nice to have more homes, but actually I don't see less super high-rise buildings as the end, as a big problem, another 10, 15 stories. I don't think that really matters as long as there's enough being built. The problem is the lack of homes. I mean, there's this chronic shortage of stuff to rent, chronic. I mean, we're seeing one thing I didn't mention earlier. I've got councils emailing us as a business saying we're able now to pay a full market rent.
Wow.
Full market rent. I mean, I'm not saying we don't have the stock for them, but the fact they're going out to try and get that's scary.
Well, look, Marc, where's this all going to end? We've got rents going up, prices going up, inflation going up, energy crisis, cost of living going up. I mean, I would imagine that tenant affordability in London is probably more robust than some other areas of the UK. But how long can this continue? Is it all going to end in tears?
I don't think it's going to end in tears. I think the crisis that's going on at the moment, obviously, is driving fuel prices. And when that can be brought a little bit under control, when we move past this quite difficult period. That should, you know, the fuel prices is driving the cost of cars, and that's also driving the cost of delivery. So it's driving the cost of, you know, let's be honest, fuel is driving an awful lot of this inflation that we're seeing. When that comes under control, I think you'll see interest rates will edge up, which is not a bad thing, because interest rates the money being so cheap at the moment isn't that helpful. And I think the end of Help to Buy, that will mean there'll be more stock coming to the market, and maybe some more of that will be bought by investors as opposed to all end users. Because what you're seeing at the moment is end users buying, you know, with the Help to Buy scheme, a lot of the lesser, you know, lower within that bracket. But with the end of Help to Buy coming, that's my prediction. You'll see a lot of developers screaming that it's going to kill them, but they have to relook at their models and see who they're going to sell to. So I don't see it ending in tears. It's just we have this massive constrictive supply, constriction in supply and strong demand. And I think that imbalance, it ultimately always starts to even out. But for landlords, you're never going to have enough homes. Everybody needs a home. People are coming here. You know, you've got the Ukrainians, you know, coming here, you know, and that's again taking stock. And I, you know, once, as I said, hopefully this conflict will end, and then we will get back to some normality when oil prices drop again and petrol prices come down, and you know, we start to see not so much inflation. But I agree with you, at the moment with inflation rating, you're going to see pressure on wages, you're going to see pressure everywhere, and that's really scary. But I think, you know, we need to get past this period. But you know, from a landlord's perspective, being really being really honest, you know, we're going to see, we've had it hard for a long time. Let's be honest, landlords have been under pressure. You've got the government wanting to, you know, vilify us and chuck us under a bloody train. And you've got rents having been held down for a long time, capital prices going up and rents held down. You're seeing that evening now, and it deserves to. You can't have rents, you know, the yields as low as they are. I mean, a lot of overseas investors, you're right, we have a lot, they look at our yields and go, why would I buy in London on a 3%, 3.5% yield? I can, in my, you know, wherever they are, they're getting 5-6% yield. They obviously don't take into account the capital growth, which we haven't seen for the last 5 years. But I think that evening up, that leveling up, as Michael Gove calls it, but he doesn't mean that about landlords. But I think landlords need a bit of a boost. Landlords deserve that. And I think so they should make hay. The last couple of years, they've not been able to. So they should, last 5 years, they've not been able to. So I think now my view is they should, if you're a landlord, you should make sure you get a really strong rent. Really check. That's my advice. My one bit of advice I was going to say at the end is really check if the tenant's offering you 10% more and you agree that, is that enough? You know, could you get 25% more? You know, you would check that. You should shop around before you agree it. And number two is look for the length of tenancy. You know, look for a long, why should you, just because the tenant's been there for 3 years and he wants to renew and is happy to give you a bit more rent, that's great. How long is he committing for? If it's only a short period, my view is, at the moment, I'm a landlord. If any of my tenants want to renew, while I want them to stay, and I'm happy to take a little less rent, I want them to sign up a year, just like a new tenant would. I don't want to have them leaving in December. So, I think now is the time for a landlord to take back control and get themselves a good, strong rent. And as I said, those landlords that we speak to who follow our advice, I think they've done very well in, last 6 months have been blinding for landlords. And so it should be.
Well, amen to that, Mark. I think it is, when I started out in London in 2004, there had been no capital growth at all. And I thought, well, as there hasn't been any capital growth, that means there's potential for capital growth. And thankfully, I was proved right on that occasion. Just to end up then, Mark, let's talk about HPI. Nationwide saying London is up 7% year on year, and we could be going into double-digit figures. So we've got rising rents, rising capital appreciation, why wouldn't landlords go and fill their boots in the capital?
That's the best thing I've heard. Why would they not? Look, I think 7% has been amazing. And I think people forecasting double-digit increases are being very bullish. And while I'm very bullish as a person generally, my estimate is still over the next 12 months, we'll see 5 to 6%. I think London is the jewel in the crown, jewel in the property crown this year. Look, the outside London has done very well during COVID for obvious reasons, which everybody talks to death about, and London has been left behind. The property market in London, as I've talked about, is raging, and so therefore now is a great time to get in. But it's only a good time to get in if you're ready. So people always say to me, when's the best time to buy? Buy when you've got your money ready. There's no point finding something and then having to ring round your granny and you're raiding your children's piggy banks to try and get the money to do it. That's not the way it works, because you can't, and it just puts you under pressure and stress. The time to buy is when you have the money and you're ready to go, and that's the time. I'm still working. I can't even predict the bottom of the market or the top of the market, and if I can't do it, then I defy people to do that. So, everybody seems to be able to do it except for me. But my advice is, get your finances ready, get in place, and go buy something. And I think it's a good time. I'm looking myself. I completed on something in January. I've got offers in on 3 properties at the moment. God knows how I'm going to pay for them. But I've got offers in on 3 properties, but whether any get accepted, I genuinely totally agree with you, Vanessa. This is a good time for a landlord to buy. And you buy it, you put it away for 5 years, 10 years. It's a great appreciating asset, especially in times of raging inflation. It's good. It's a good wealth protector, if any of us have any wealth, but it's a good way to protect your total assets. And I think it's fantastic. And even a lot interesting, I was on one of these recently, and someone said to me, but Mark, I live in Norfolk. Why would I want to buy a property in London? I only come up to London at Christmas to see the lights and go for dinner. Why would I buy a property in London? Why wouldn't I just buy in Norwich? Because I live in Norfolk. It's close to me. Because it has nothing to do with where you live. This is an investment. An investment you should drive. I think the reason I like London is because it's a capital city, and this is where, whether you like it or not, this is where the bulk of investment gets made. And whether they do stuff in Manchester or Birmingham with HS2, if it comes, and Crossrail, if it eventually opens, it's all London-centric ultimately, and I think this is the place. And you know what? And I think, and my client actually, he just rang me a couple of weeks ago and told me that he'd offered on a property which is going to go in actually not far from you in Stratford. He's bought something, and he'll do very well from that over the long term. You see that so many people don't live in London, they buy in London, and before they know it, the property in London is worth more than their house in the country. Mm. And so I think, that's my bit. And I think, fill your boots, London property, fill your boots now.
Well, do you know what, Mark? I certainly couldn't have envisaged having this conversation 18 months ago.
Definitely not.
London were deserted, the trains were deserted, the shops were deserted. It's been the most incredible comeback, and ultimately that's what shows the resilience of the London property market. 100%. I'm going to stick with it. I've got my flats and apartments in North and East London, all tenanted, rents all going up. I think it's going to be a golden era for London property in the coming years. It's always a safe haven in times of economic uncertainty. Yeah. Well, Brexit hasn't really made a dent, as proved by the tech hub that we've been talking about earlier. So it's so interesting and so worthwhile to the Property Tribes community to hear your view, Mark. You're on the coalface every day. You know how it is. It's not media headlines. It's not clickbait. You're there seeing how it is. So thank you so much for joining me again.
Thank you very much. Can I add one thing, actually? Interesting thing I meant to say. This is interesting for everybody. We're talking about lack of supply and strong demand. One thing everybody's bear in mind is everybody filled their boots. As you said, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we were not having this conversation, but because lots of people filled their boots for Airbnb and people were doing lots of short term, that's under massive pressure now. And so many landlords who moved from Airbnb into long-term housing we must have had 50 landlords who gave us properties that they've been short letting, and we've gone through and had a go at them because we want to see if any were going to go back to short term. And only one of we had 48 in the end. It was, if you want an exact number, we had 48 who moved from short term to long term lets, and they gave it to us on long term. Only one of those is going back into the short term market because they're going to use it occasionally when they're in London. And that's an interesting stat. So wow. The fact that people are not they're not driving that, short-term, slightly higher rents. They're quite comfortable. I'm happy to have the monthly income from a good tenant, not paying the bills and knowing I've got that income there, rather than having to rent 3 days last week and 2 days next week and cleaning and wear and tear. That's just a little analogy, but fill your boots with London property. I'm here to take it. No, I'm here to help.
Well, so just very interesting what you've said, because it might mean that there's a shortage of short-term rental accommodation.
You don't say things like that. That's meant to be against the council's restrictions, but there might be. But there are not too many tourists at the moment, so as they come back, I imagine it'll restart.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this call, Marc, and we'll hopefully be able to check in with you again in a couple of months' time to see if that good news just keeps on coming. But it's certainly looking like the sun is shining on the London property market spring 2022. Thank you very much to Marc from Benham Reeves.
Thank you very much. Thank you.